it was, I think, over a year ago that I started getting into the Get Wisdom teachings and reading that. And one of the talks I did was on prayer. So I offer you again the prayers that this has been channeled from Creator to have the option of using those daily. But that vein that I'm mining with Get Wisdom seems to be very, very rich. And so the talk today is drawn from a lot of questions that have been asked about our mind and about the sense of intuition. And last night, before I dropped off to sleep, I was still struggling with how much information I had, knowing that I'm not going to be able to get to it all. But the image that came to me was of a door. And the door was unusual because it was more like a gate. It was like a big door, but it wasn't solid. It had all these openings in it so that you could see through to the other side. And I realized that what I'm trying to do in my own way is give you guys a glimpse of what I'm picking up from this information so that you can see a little bit more about what might be true. And the door, I tried to push it open, and it was so heavy and it was so stuck from not having been used that it was difficult to get it open enough to even go through. But I think that was the point, because we have to realize that we haven't taken that opportunity to move in that direction very often. And it's there for us, but a lot of things cover it up or start corroding away at the bottom and, making it difficult to swing open. And I was remembering this morning, of course, my parents had the famous, one of the standard pictures of Jesus knocking at the door, in the house. So I grew up with that. But again, I think it was just an example of this idea that you need to open the door to invite God in. And that's what prayer is about. So try to give you a glimpse of some of the things I'm learning. Today, like I said, I want to talk about the 5 levels of the mind. And, what was the design when we were created? What was the design of our mind, our conscious self? And how did that change? Why did it change? And what can we do about it? So that's kind of the overview. Let's start with the idea that our true nature is a soul that exists as consciousness and as an extension of the Creator's consciousness. So this consciousness, to my mind, was that idea of God created us in His image. It wasn't a human form, it was consciousness. And consciousness has within it, according to the Creator that I'm reading these channelings from, has within it everything it needs to manifest anything that it desires. Now that's on a soul level. We're connected to that, but we're not living that right now. So we don't have the total freedom or power that a soul does, but still we have that connection. And the reason that we were created this way was also to give us an individual essence so that we could have autonomy, so that we could exist separately and experience our own existence. So we're a part of God and able to think for ourselves, and that is by virtue of the soul that was created for us. Now, you also might observe that everything in creation has this uniqueness about it. No 2 snowflakes are the same, no 2 grains of sand. And it's the same with the soul. And it's for a reason. Creator says in this channeling that the soul characteristics are varied, and that's a deliberate aspect of creation, that novelty and variety was the goal of creation to begin with. So this uniqueness is critical because it gives everyone endless opportunities for exploration and growth and learning. Because even though we were created as a soul, we don't know everything. We have a lot to learn. And that's what the whole free will thing is about. So this link to our soul is also what's so important when it comes to prayer, because that's a connection that we have, that we were given, and that's our heritage, to have that connection. So how was it when we were created? What was that like, that connection? And from what I'm told, and if you think about it, you remember the story about Adam and Eve in the garden? I mean, this is typically the Bible, but it's saying that they walked and talked with God. And what this source is saying is that that's how we were actually intended to live. That connection was ever present, certain, allowing direct conversation back and forth, a part of our daily experience. And so we could have an impulse to reach out to God and ask a question, and we would hear a response. Now, to me, that sounds an awful lot like the internet. We can ask any question we want, and we can reach out there. But the thing is, we don't necessarily get a true answer. But it's interesting that there's this example of how things could be, and we've come to rely on it quite a bit. Now, the problem is that this link was affected by these higher beings that, not higher, I guess I wouldn't say they're higher, but they're certainly more advanced than us in some technological ways. They were able to actually manipulate our DNA 100,000 years ago. If you look at the history of our genetic structure, there's an actual fusion of a chromosome that is not natural. It's not the result of, what do you call that? No, I'm thinking of the impinging of different sources that can cause a defect in that gene. Mutation. Yeah, no, it's not a mutation because they can see that it's been fused together in a very specific way. It's not like it was just altered. One gene it's two genes that were fused together. And that's very unusual. I still don't understand it, but this is what he's saying, is Creator is telling us that this was done on purpose to us. We were here enjoying our Garden of Eden in this planet, and they decided that they wanted it. They wanted to take it. And so this was their option. They came up with this way so that they could control us. They could actually manipulate a lot of our civilization. And it made us much more docile because we didn't have a connection now to that intuition source, that greater source that can reach out beyond us and ask questions or get answers. So we were limited due to that. So even though our soul has all the powers and we have connections to that, we don't have the solid connection we were actually given. So now we're limited to a very weak connection. We still draw our life energy from our souls. And there is a weak link there, but it's very hard for us to perceive it. And so, however, we are here. We have this free will world to live in. So do they. They've abused us in a way, and so it's our responsibility to take that back in some fashion. Unfortunately, their abilities are much larger than ours. I guess you'd say they've been around for millions of years. Their civilization is actually billions of years old. And he gets into all this. I won't go into a lot of detail, but basically, there's no way that we would have the power, the tools, the technology to defeat them. And they're not looking for that. They've been here with us for so long. They use a specific plan, which is basically to deceive us into thinking that we're doing it all by ourselves. But if you look at things like human nature, to us, it's almost become a bad word. Our nature is not assumed to be good and beneficial. It's assumed that we're out to get each other and that that's the only rule. So they've twisted things for us and allowed us to continue, but removing the source of any rebellion and sense that we would try to do. Regardless, we still have that connection, and our true power and part of our true being that they don't have is our connection to the source, because they had that to begin with, but billions of years ago they squandered it. And if you think of the story about the fallen angels, that's what it was like. They've become so turned away from God that there is no love left in them. There is no benefit left of that source, and they can't reach out. They don't even believe it exists at all. So, atheistic psychopaths? I mean, if you want to think of an entire culture that's just that extreme, that's what they're telling us. So, but we have this ability, we have this connection still, and it's through prayer that we can draw God closer to us and to ask for his help. And at this point, it's a lot like World War II. We're fighting this enemy, and it's very challenging. The entire world had to come together to defeat that enemy. Well, these forces, these dark forces, were actually helping them. And it was our prayers as a nation that actually were able to turn the tide to change that. And so again, prayer is much more important than we give it credit for, even though it's been, the idea has been taken down by their influence to become less important, because they don't see that as something that's of value at all. They think it's crazy. Anyway, it can help us, and so that is part of what's needed. And so if we look at the design of ourselves, losing this connection, being dropped down into this weaker state of knowing, we don't even know who we are when we're born here or why we're here. Those are things we would have learned if we had the intuition ability to connect back to source. And that was intended. But now we have to get there on our own. We have to reach out on our own to try to come to grips with what's going on here. And it's hidden from us because their main tool is deception. If you look at, what was the tool that the serpent used on Eve? It was deception. It was clearly a lie. And so that's the position we're in. We're being lied to, and yet we can't find the truth because we've been dimmed down in terms of our intuition, which would have the ability to determine if something is true or false. And a lot of times, if you're used to thinking of your own gut feelings, you can tell when something is not right. So we need to encourage that, and we need to ask God in to help us make that stronger, because that's our tool of resistance, to know what's going on. So before I get into the makeup of the human self, and this is where I'm going to be skimming. One more thing I just wanted to share, and I know I've talked before about this warning about a power outage. Because it's a prediction, of course, it's still subject to our free will and to the free will of those that intend to do it. And it's been pushed back and magnified in a way that will not be a benefit to us. But it's still intended, still on their plan to do this, to a large portion of the world, not just the United States, but we will be first because they have it in for us since we were too influential in World War II and stopped them. So the idea is that there will be still a severe power outage that will start in one part of our country and then spread over the days after that. It will last about 5 or 6 days. And so this will be mysterious. We won't know the cause. It's not going to be from storms. It's going to affect the whole country. They're going to do it when there aren't any storms because they don't want us to think that there's an actual reason. They want us to be afraid. They want us to look at this and say, what's going on? Who's responsible? We want to fix this, but we don't know how. So it's going to push us over the edge in a lot of ways. If you can imagine how people will feel when suddenly everything that they do involves electricity, because we've gotten pretty used to that. And now it's not going to be available for almost a week, maybe longer in some areas, maybe shorter in others. It will be something we can recover from, that we can get that back. But they have this secret switch. I don't know what you want to call it. I don't know the technology they're using, but they're well familiar with it. So they will use it in a way that we're not going to be aware of. And again, the intent is to scare us. So forewarned is forearmed. The other option that we're afraid is going to happen at this time because of that is that the market may crash. All it needs is one large event that it cannot, explain or recover from. And it's very likely that this could drive that to that point. So I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just warning you because if you think about it, probably your cash will be safe. But I don't know that things like on the market will be safe, because if that suddenly drops like it has in the past, and this is not something that we have any control over, but we are at a high point in the market, and generally that's when things happen. So be warned. Now, to help us a little bit more, this idea of ourself and the 5 levels, I'll try to go over this as quickly as I can. Think about the 5 levels as things that we already know about. We have our conscious self. We have a higher self that's often talked about, but that's a real thing. We have an upper subconscious, which is kind of close to us in terms of we're not always aware of what's going on there, but we get stimulated from it. We get reminded of things. And then we have something that we've not heard of before called a deep subconscious self. That self is much larger than the rest of our self, but it has been dimmed down by that genetic connection to the point where we can't talk to it. It can't talk to us. Actually, I take that back. We can talk to it. It does know what's going on. It does recognize consciousness, and it does know what's going on. And it's very psychic, but it cannot speak to us through the normal connection that it had. The only connection it has is to the body. And so that feelings, emotions can be triggered by it. It's its only way of telling you to watch out or to feel this because something's going on that it can't really talk about. And I'll get into more of the specifics, but and then the last is a cellular consciousness. The cells in our body do a lot of things. There's a lot of complexity there. There is a consciousness on top of that, closely connected to the cellular level that guides that process. In fact, one of the characteristics was that it's a template. It's the template we were born with to create the body. It tells what cells to go where, how to do this, what to connect to. So it's got the plan within us. And it's a mind construct. It's not built into the cells. It's connecting to them. So it's able to it's able to guide that process. It's able to understand what's going on within all the cellular signaling and pathways and things. So it's a very big part of consciousness, but it's not connected to our conscious self. Its job is to run the body. So it sticks in the background. It does, however, have a memory separate from the brain. And this memory is in the cells. And I think if you know anything about trauma, you will find that trauma that is created when the body is injured is stored in the cells. And it's the feeling of that experience. It's not the factual memory of what happened. It's it's what the feeling was that happened to you, what did that cause? And that's the trauma. So that's part of the cellular consciousness. So a little bit more breakdown on that. Squeeze in here. Let's see. Try to give you some of the high points. I mean, there's a lot of information, and if anyone wants to explore it further, I'd be happy to do that.
Steve?
Yes.
People, you could do part 2 next week.
Well, if there's the interest, certainly, I'd be happy to.
We need a speaker.
Yeah, there you go. That's because this is very powerful. What you're bringing is.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that to understand that your mind has these separate parts to it that have a function, and to understand how all this connects together is a bit tricky. So I'll give you the overview, I'll give you the skim of what these layers are, but really to talk about how they interact and how this helps you or harms you, what's going on there, that's a tougher topic to express. So yeah. So higher self, quickly.
What would create appreciation, Steve?
All right. We call it the higher self because its perspective is much wider than ours. It knows why we came here. It knows what the plan is. It knows what those spiritual resources are beyond the physical. And it is always there for us, always on duty. In fact, I wanted to make a point that our consciousness is the only part of our mind that sleeps. The rest of it is always awake and always available. And so, again, the higher self is like that lifeline. It's like a deep sea diver. They have an air hose going back to the surface. That's the link to the higher self. It provides us with the energy from soul that we live on. And consciousness is only fed by this energy. It's not fed by the food we eat or what we drink. So this is a direct line of that energy, and it has a communication link. Of course, unfortunately, it's very, what was the word? Intuitive, very subtle. And so it's hard to hear. But again, it serves us, it helps us, it can guide us, it's looking to guide us as much as possible. It can speak to this deeper level of the subconscious, so they can have a conversation back and forth that you know nothing about. And it's actually bigger than the deeper subconscious in terms of its area, its size. So that's on top. You've got your conscious self, which is generating thought, and it's here to lead. You're the one making decisions. This is the conscious self. That's your responsibility. And the subconscious is kind of its backup. It's kind of its handmaiden. It's there to give you information that you previously had, but maybe forgot. If you say you wanted to do something and you made an appointment, it will remind you when it's doing its job correctly and you're listening for it. But it is there to bring those memories and things back to the surface for you. It can't decide what to do. That's up to you. But it can present them because you made a point of saying that was important to you. So it's your intentions that are guiding it. So it's very helpful to us. But again, it's not meant to be the dominant force. And it can be hypnotized, but the deep self cannot be hypnotized. In fact, that's why we haven't discovered it yet. So the deep self is, again, a very large self. It's very psychic. It has an intact link intuitively to connect with things like the Akashic Record, which stores all of our past history of our various lives. It has the ability to reach out into the collective unconscious, which is actually an area where thoughts go that are part of our consciousness but are persistent. Thoughts that we tend to have over and over or mean a lot to us or have a lot of feeling attached to them. They go to the collective unconscious, and everyone actually can share those thoughts. We can also share the negative ones. So that's a drawback, but the deep subconscious has access to it. It is also then able to connect through that tiny link that's left into the upper subconscious. And, it can't talk, but again, it's expressing itself through emotions. It can modify our dreams, though. It can give us signals in our dreams. And that's really the only way it can communicate at all. So if you remember waking up from a deep sleep and having a very powerful dream, that's more than likely a message from the deeper self. But that's the only bridge that it has. But because it can see all these things, and again, the purpose of all of these cells is to help us survive. It's about us being alive here. So that's the point of all these cells, to help us in very many different ways to continue to be here. And so that is its goal, but it can see things we can't see, and it can't tell us. So it kind of gets pretty, it can dwell on things that were in the past, because to the deeper self, time is not an issue. So it's not only in the present. It can see the past, it can remember the past, long, long past. And the last point I'll make is about the ego. The ego is a part of our consciousness, and it's an extension of the spirit. So it does go with us when we die. We don't leave it behind. It's not an accident. It is pre-planned. And the point of the ego, again, is self-preservation. It can be overruled by the conscious mind and managed by the conscious mind, but we need to learn to do that. Otherwise, it can do things without any planning, which could be very impactful of our lives that we wouldn't have intended. So it can go overboard, because it's like the suit of armor that's autonomous, and when it's triggered, it reacts to protect us. But it doesn't know that it's knocking everything over and disturbing things, so it has to be controlled in a sense. So it's really there to help us survive, but it's an automatic function in some ways, and that's important to us, but we need to learn to manage it. So I think I'll stop there. There's more, but I know it's past time. And so let me just close with this prayer. This one is the one that's designed to help us raise our belief in the divine and in oneself. So it starts out, Source Creator, raise us up each and every day to feel divine love, to open to divine love, and to express divine love through us in all we do. Amen, and thank you.